So who are we that we're talking about homesteading mistakes? What is our, what are our stats?
What's your story?
Yeah, quick story.
Our story. So we have been off-grid for 4 years. We live on 3 wooded acres on a north-facing slope. In the mountains we have pine trees, we have fir trees. When we first bought the place, we lived in a yurt. We lived in that yurt for 3 years while we worked on building the house that we are currently in. We've been in this house for a year. It is a in process, less than 1,000 square foot timber framed house, and all of the stick lumber has come from trees on our land, which I milled myself. We have gotten by off-grid. We've carried a lot of water. We have run generators and have a little bit of experience with solar for getting our energy needs.
And coming into this, we were coming from the city, but we do have some sources of knowledge. My mother rather literally wrote the book on homesteading. My mom was Carla Emery, and she wrote a book called the Encyclopedia of Country Living. Unfortunately, I wasn't paying a lot of attention to her because of how children are, so I've had to make my own mistakes there. And Nick was pretty skilled in building a variety of things when we came out here. So we weren't starting completely from zero, but we certainly were not experienced homesteaders.
Not at all. My experience comes from building theater sets, which aren't real, and they're not outside generally. So there was a bit of a learning curve as far as building permanent structures, but we're well underway, and we sort of do our research as we go, and just make do with our wits and our ability to gather what we need.
One reason that we wanted to do this video is that homesteading for 4 years, we've had really good times where we were very productive. We're in a great time right now, and we've also had very slow times. And we put our heads together over the last couple days and thought about what's the difference between our times when we're trucking and we really feel like we know what we're doing, and there's some kind of integrity between what we want and what we're actually doing, and the times where there's less so. So we came up with 5 things that we want to share with you, a little bit more big picture things. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, number 1, believing in experts.
Yeah. So I guess we were moderately unprepared when we moved out here. We didn't have a lot of expertise, but we really knew that we wanted to be here, I guess. So when looking for skills and information and just ways to go about succeeding out here, we thought that there were going to be you know, trained professionals out there who are going to help us decide
how to live our lives.
Right, that's what it comes down to. I mean, yes, there are technical aspects of any thing that we're trying to do out here, and there are people with experience in those. But as far as how it fits for us, or what the context is, there's just nobody out there who can actually tell you the right way to do it.
There's nobody who can tell you what you want, and there's nobody who can tell you where you're standing. There's nobody who can experience what you're experiencing. And I think that one thing that has really slowed me down, especially in gardening or farming, producing food, has been waiting for somebody to tell me how to do it. This fall, I finally got to the point where I had tried. We went to a PDC this last summer, and in kind of technical terms, that was not a good decision for us. And I think it's not just what PDC we went to. I think it was just going to one at all.
What's a PDC?
What's a PDC? That's a permaculture design course. We like permaculture. We've done a lot of reading about permaculture, both as a design system and also just kind of a culture that a lot of interesting, smart people are involved in. So we went to a course to learn more about permaculture.
And there were some very smart people there. Absolutely.
Yes.
People who really know their stuff and can talk at length about their experiences doing any of these things.
But we didn't really need to go. The connection between that knowledge and what we were trying to accomplish on the homestead was the problem. We love knowledge, but we think it's possible to appreciate people's knowledge and also make your own decisions about what you need to do next and what you need to learn next. And I think that I, in particular, really fell out of that this past summer and had to take a good look and say, who's going to do it? Right. Who's going to stand here and look at how this water moves and where the sun is coming from and whether this plant is happy or this other plant is happy? At some point, I got to just seriously pull up the big girl panties and do this myself.
Right, and there is, there is definitely that time of gathering knowledge, and you should use every resource available to you, I guess. But nobody's going to come in and be your expert.
Right.
And even if they did provide you with a whole lot of even concrete plans on what to do, you're the one who has to pull it off, like you're saying. So it better you better be pretty well invested in that plan
and able to observe and react. And that's actually one of the principles in permaculture. But to understand that as a way of being, that you can see what's going wrong and actually respond to that and feel like you have the confidence to. When you're thinking about self-sufficiency or a lifestyle of self-sufficiency, you have to shake some of what you've been taught by a world that would rather not have us self-sufficient. I mean, just in terms of economics, it's not great to have a bunch of self-sufficient people. They don't buy stuff.
They don't hire other people to do their plumbing or sweep their floors.
So for me, at least, there's been some rewiring in my brain to say, no, I don't wait for somebody else to do this. And it's a continuing project for me to say, wait, who's in charge of this moment? I am. I have a direct relationship with this data, with this information. And as much as I love to read, I really love to read, and I really love to just read, and I could just read and read and read, and nothing happens.
Right.
You know, at some point, I gotta just set down the expert text and do my own work.
Absolutely.
So the next one, that takes us to, this is related. A common homesteading mistake that we make and that we see other people making is taking skills out of context and also taking tools out of context. Can you explain it?
Absolutely. So, before we started, we thought about, I guess, things that we wanted to incorporate here, whether it be animals or that I wanted to build a timber frame house or that we wanted to grow food. The whole homestead is not like a magazine collage where you just cut out a little bit of this and it goes over here and this other thing goes over here. It all has to come from one sort of central idea, and you acquire and apply your skills as needed within that. And I guess we were certainly guilty of sort of a cut and paste approach in our first few years out here.
Right, and also, again, this summer when I slowed down, I had gotten myself into a place where I was trying to acquire skills in this kind of stock the shelves kind of way, which is great, but it doesn't actually put you out on a limb to say, here's my goal and what's the next step to accomplish it. So let me try to come at this a different way. We just said that going to a permaculture design course this past summer was not the right choice. But before we moved out here, just a few months before we moved out here, Nick went to a timber frame course.
Yeah.
And that was 100% worth the money.
Absolutely. It was a week long, and I camped and listened to people, teach me their craft, which was timber framing, and I got to try my hand at it, and we put together a small frame in a week, and it really gave me a good sense of a whole process. But again, I had that goal specifically in mind. So I knew what I was looking for, the pieces that I didn't have, and so I was able to make good use of my time there. I think that being a educational tourist of just sort of
Me again.
this, well, right, but a lot of people,
Yeah.
where you just have a lot of varied interests, and you can call them hobbies or whatever, and you're just sort of putting them in your pocket for whenever. Learning out of context is a lot harder to apply if you don't know where this knowledge is going to be applied. You're not going to have as complete an understanding of it.
And again, we're talking about making a transition from a worldview in which you're very dependent on various other forces that provide you with what you need into a worldview where you're doing it yourself. So we're talking about a DIY or self-sufficient worldview. And again, it's this transition from I just do it for fun, but I'm not actually accountable to it, to I am making my own life work, and I only do the things that I need to in order to do that. And for me, it's a matter of just pure exhaustion. I mean, my mother wrote a book called the Encyclopedia of Country Living, and it was her fascination and her passion and her life's work to gather all this information. But that book is like this, and I'm very familiar with its contents, but when I even just think about that, it makes me tired and I don't want to do anything.
Right.
So to make yourself actually productive, taking a lot of skills out of context, trying to do things that you don't really need to do or that don't fit together with goals that you have for your life or for your homestead, it can wear you right out. It can knock you right out of the game.
Absolutely. And your effort is like your number one resource. So you want to be careful about how you spray that all over the landscape.
Yes, that. Okay, let's do number 3. Planning in days instead of years.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know, when we first came out here, it wasn't like a survival level existence necessarily, but just the day-to-day took up all the juice that we had.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
It literally hurt me to think about things in terms of 5 years or 10 years when we first came out here. Yeah. It's hard to think I'm going to still be alive in 5 years. Right. And that's really some rewiring to say, oh, wow, I really can't just make it all right now. And if I do just make it all right now, then I'm probably going to wear myself out, spray my effort around, make things wrong.
Right.
It's the ability to have that kind of restraint. But the other thing I'll say about it is that I also came with the worldview that if you're not patient, that's a character flaw. Instead of a worldview problem, where I'm not a bad person because I was impatient. I had been trained by the world I live in and the way it works to be impatient. You know, buy now, buy on credit, right. Get what you want right now. And if you don't get what you want right now, there's something wrong with you.
Absolutely. You can change what you have as fast as you can change your mind. You know, you can just sort of decide and say, okay, well, I'm going to have one of those now. Or call up this person, and that is going to get done, you know. And
that is the treadmill we're trying to get off.
Absolutely. For me, that short-sighted planning had a lot to do with the labor-intensive day-to-day. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't look much past, you know, a couple of weeks because what I was doing in that moment was so hard, you know. Still had to carry in the wood, still had to carry in the water, had to keep that fire going, had to, you know, it was a cycle of using all of my effort in just existing.
And there's a cyclical thing there because the effort of our day-to-day had to do with our impatience. So this summer we made the decision to sell our goats. We're going to get more animals next summer, and I'm super excited about it. But I had to kind of swallow my pride and sell the goats because I was taking up a big chunk of my day-to-day with poor infrastructure related to something that I had wanted right away.
Right. Yeah.
I like animals, but in the winter time, if you don't have water systems and you don't have electricity and you're trying to get water to your animals so they don't die, and right, this is no joke.
Yeah.
And you don't have a system in place for that, it can be super exhausting. And I had very small children as well. And so here I am keeping my children alive, keeping my animals alive, and I'm on the treadmill.
Absolutely. And so once we got past sort of our survival mode of carrying water and all of that, we got some of those things ironed out. For us, we went ahead and put animals in the same situation.
Right.
Where oh, we got to carry this and we got to do this, and it was too labor intensive.
Done with that one?
I think so.
Okay, so that brings us to number 4. I dropped my page, but I remember it. Designing utilities first instead of last instead of first. You need to think about utilities first.
Even if you can do without them, which we have, it needs to be in the plan. And I don't necessarily mean utilities like getting power to your property, or putting up the power poles or having money set aside for that, but just meeting your needs, some way of meeting your needs. It has to be somewhere in the plan. And in our yurt experience, we really had no plan for it. And we very slowly sort of developed some ways to make that stuff easier. We got a water line down there. We got some solar power down there. But it was slow going.
And I think when I say design the utilities first, in an off-grid setup, what I mean is look at the sun and look at your water.
Sure.
The sun is the original source of light and power. I think it's easy to forget that when you when your experience is all fossil fuels. You think, well, the sun's not good for much. The sun is just like that's a weak energy compared to an engine, which is a strong energy. But that engine is burning something that the sun made in the first place. So being able to say to yourself, before you do anything else, before you build that woodshed, before you site that yurt, before you put in that window, where is the sun coming from? It's very self-explanatory. It's very common sense, but it's a mind shift that I am constantly having to make. I need to think about where the sun is coming from and where it's going, where the water is coming from and where it's going, before I take any other action. And that's what I mean when I say design utilities first. Good? Mm-hmm. Okay, and the last one is be divided and be conquered. A worldview thing that has limited us.
Absolutely. We have our areas of expertise. We have diversified our toolbox, I guess. But at the times when I'm doing something that she has no knowledge of, or vice versa, it can be really difficult to keep communication open and feel like you're going towards the same goal.
And I should clarify that this doesn't necessarily have to be a conflict point. We have definitely had conflict points. There was one point at which a pile of brush got set on some tender new plants where I was pretty grumpy. But I think that even if you're doing great, and we get along great, we have a great marriage, even if you're doing great, you're missing out if you're doing things separately, because the homestead doesn't separate things. And I'll give you an example. I'll tell a story to make an example. So generally I do gardening and he does building, right? So, and I've been a little slow on my gardening because I read too many books, and we've all heard about this. But the limiting factor on this property for gardening is mostly water. You could also say that it's sun because we're north facing, but we have a very hot summer sun, and we do fine. The plants are actually, the first thing that kills them is lack of water. So I'm thinking about how to get water to my garden. Meanwhile, he's planning a large building directly uphill of my garden, which is his workshop, which is where he's going to be able to build things. And I don't want to help him with his workshop. And I'm thinking about how I'm going to get water to my garden, which is right downhill of the workshop. At some point we get to the point that that roof is perfect for water catchment, water storage, which will then water to the garden. And it's just that illusion of how things are separated. And again, this comes from a world where everyone's very specialized, and specialization is great. It's built civilization. It's been wonderful. Yeah. But in some ways, we're trying to reverse that in becoming whole people with a lot of skills to take care of ourselves. That rooster is really going at it. Yeah. Esmia's trying to take this from me. Are we okay? Sorry about the distracting rooster. So my point is that sometimes we have to reverse specialization and say, I actually am fully capable of understanding building. And when we kind of got back together on that, where I was watching him every day and participating every day, I was having more fun.
As was I.
And we're going to find out in March whether the opposite is true when he starts to help me build shelves for my seedlings.
Absolutely.
Not my seedlings, our seedlings.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just more pleasant that way. There's a lot of jobs around here that are simply not one-person jobs.
Right.
So if everybody's invested, then at those times when you really need more hands, it's much easier to come by.
So divide, be divided and be conquered.
Sure.
That's one of our lessons that we've learned. That's all of them.
That's it?
Yeah, that was 10.
Okay.
I feel like we just talked for a long time. I hope somebody got something from that. So we are Fouch Family Off-Grid. We do a lot of different kinds of videos, not just this kind. But we're here, and we really appreciate all of you who've been watching us and taking care of our YouTube channel. We love knowing that there are other folks out there who want to fly a flag for this kind of lifestyle, and we believe in becoming more able to take care of ourselves and more able to take care of one another. And that's our story.
That's it.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll see you next time.
See ya.